Hi friends, today's tutorial is extra special because I've teamed up with the wonderful Natalie from Nat Giso. This video is part one of our two-part series teaching you to crochet the matching Pebble Beach Baby Blanket and Bucket Hat set. Once you finish the blanket here with me, head over to Natalie's channel for part two to make the matching bucket hat. I've added the link below in the description. This cozy blanket is crocheted using one of my favorite stitches called the Elizabeth stitch or mini bean stitch. It's a fun reversible stitch, meaning it looks the same on both sides with an easy one row repeat. Before we begin, let's go over what you'll need to make your blanket. As always, I've linked to the materials and pattern in the video description, so be sure to check that out. This pattern requires 3 colors of worsted weight yarn. I used We Crochet's Heatherly Worsted in the colors Snowflake, Otter, and Bedtime. You'll also need a size J10 or 6mm crochet hook. I love this Aura hook from We Crochet because it has a nice pointy tip. And finally, a pair of scissors and a yarn needle for cutting and weaving in ends. And now we can begin crocheting the foundation chain. To keep this video to the point, I'm assuming that you know the very basics of crochet, such as how to make a chain and how to work a single crochet stitch. Start by making a slip knot and then secure it on the hook. And then if you're crocheting the Pebble Beach blanket, make a foundation chain of 111 stitches. You can alter the width too by chaining any odd number if you want to make the blanket wider or narrower. And I'm going to chain 29 stitches just so that I can work on a smaller swatch for this video. And now with the foundation chain complete, we can begin the first row, which is a row of single crochet stitches. We'll begin by making the first single crochet into the second chain from the hook. And I like to crochet into the top bumps of the foundation chain because it leaves a cleaner edge, but it's up to you. Insert your hook into the stitch and pull up a loop. And then yarn over and pull through the loops on the hook to make your single crochet stitch. And then continue to single crochet in each chain down the row until you reach the end of the row. Okay, after making a single crochet into the last chain, we'll turn our work and begin row 2, which is the first row of Elizabeth stitch. We'll begin by chaining 3 and then skip the first single crochet. Now insert the hook into the next single crochet through both loops at the top of the stitch. And then once you've done that, we'll pull up a loop. So now there are 2 loops on the hook. Then yarn over and insert the hook back into the same stitch and pull up another loop. So now we have 4 loops on the hook. And to complete this stitch, we'll just yarn over one more time and pull through the 4 loops on the hook. And that's it. So this is the mini bean stitch because it looks like a little bean. And now we'll chain 1 and skip the next stitch. And now we can make a mini bean stitch in the next single crochet again. Insert your hook into the stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, insert the hook back into the stitch and pull up a loop again, and then yarn over and pull through the remaining 4 loops on the hook. Chain 1 and skip the next stitch. So we're just making the mini bean stitch in every other stitch and chaining 1 to cover the skipped stitch. So that's it for row 2. Just repeat these steps all the way down until you reach the very last stitch. And make a mini bean stitch into that last stitch, but this time don't chain 1. Just turn your work to begin row 3. Row 3 is the row that you're going to repeat from here on out, and it's worked pretty much the same as row 2. So we're going to chain 3 to start the row, and then skip the first stitch, which was the last mini bean stitch from the row below. Then, in the next chain 1 space, we'll make the first mini bean stitch of this row. And then we'll chain 1, skip the next stitch, which was a mini bean stitch, and then work another mini bean stitch in the next chain 1 space. So what we're doing is we are alternating mini bean stitches and chain 1s again, but this time we're working the mini bean stitches into the chain 1 spaces from the row below. When you reach the end of the row, you'll see that the last stitch is followed by the first chain 3 made at the beginning of the previous row. We'll work the final mini bean stitch into the space between the last stitch and that chain 3. And now we can turn and repeat row 3 for the rest of the pattern. So you're just going to work repeats of row 3 until your blanket reaches the size that you want it to be, or if you're following the pattern, until you've completed the color chart. And then when you reach the final row, you'll need to work a row of single crochet stitches just so that the top mirrors the bottom. And I'll show you how to work that final row in a bit. But before we get to the last row, let's go over the color chart for the Pebble Beach blanket and how to change colors seamlessly with this stitch pattern. This blanket follows a stripe design and alternates between 3 colors. So reading the chart from bottom to top, you'll work 8 rows in color A, which is the first color that you started with. Then you'll switch to color B and work 1 row with color B, followed by 4 rows of color C, and then another row of color B, and so on going up the chart. And don't worry, you don't have to memorize this chart. All of this info is in the pattern, which I've linked to in the description of this video. I just wanted to give you an overview of the color layout. And now I'll show you how to make a clean color change. When working on stripe patterns like this one, color changes are made in the last stitch at the end of the row, just before starting with the new color. So we'll insert the hook into the space between the last stitch and the chain 3 and work the last mini bean stitch just like any other row. Pull up the first loop, yarn over, insert the hook back in, and pull up another loop so that there are 4 loops on the hook. And then instead of pulling through with the current color to finish off the stitch, we'll use the color that we want for the next row. Pull those ends tight, and now we can continue to crochet the next row with the new color with a nice clean transition. I'm speeding up the video here just to show you how the next row after the color change should look after you've worked a few stitches. And as you can see, there's no obvious color change and the swatch looks great on both sides. I've worked a couple of rows with the new color, and now I'm just going to switch back to the white to demonstrate the final row, which will be a row of single crochet stitches to mirror the first row. Remember that first row we made was a row of single crochet before we started the Elizabeth stitch. So we want the top to look like the bottom. So we'll work 1 more row of single crochet stitches. We'll turn our work and then this time chain 1 instead of 3. And then single crochet into the first mini bean stitch. The next stitch is a chain one, and we're going to single crochet into the chain one stitch itself and not the space that it creates. And then we'll just continue single crocheting into each mini bean stitch and each chain stitch down the row to complete the final row of single crochet stitches. And I'm not sure I like how this looks with the final row being a different color from the row below it. So I'm going to rip this out and work a couple more rows in Elizabeth stitch with the white, and then I'll crochet the final row of single crochet stitches in the white and come back to show you how to weave in ends and work a simple border. I get a lot of questions about weaving in ends, so I'll take a minute to show you how I wove in my ends for this blanket. Now, there's no hard rule with how to weave them in, but I just try my best to do it in a way that hides the ends while making them secure. What I like to do is thread my needle with a yarn end and then weave it through the stitches of the same color. Then, after going through a few stitches, I tuck it under a slightly tighter area and weave it back in the opposite direction, catching a few strands of yarn along the way to secure it. That's it. Then I just grab a pair of scissors and snip off that end as close as I can to the last spot that it's coming out of to hide it. And as you can see, you can barely see the end there. So I did not tie any knots. And you can if you want to make it extra secure. But if you weave it really carefully, you won't need to. And also, you don't have to weave in the ends. You can just cover them when you work the border. So I'm going to show you how to make a single crochet border. And when I do this border, I'll leave some ends so that I can show you how to crochet over them as well. It's not my favorite way. I like to weave them in first because it can get lumpy. But if you're feeling lazy, that's another option. When you reach the end of the final row, which remember is just a row of single crochet stitches, work the last single crochet into the chain 3 space, and then you're ready to start working on the border. Chain 1, turn your work, and we'll begin working 2 rounds of a simple single crochet border. So we'll begin by single crocheting into each stitch of the final row for the top edge. This is the easy part. We're just going to single crochet down the row, and then once we reach the last stitch, we're going to work 3 single crochets into the last stitch. And the reason for this is that if we just worked one stitch and we continued working down the side, the ends would curl in because there wouldn't be enough stitches for the turn. So by working 3 stitches into the corner, we're adding that little extra bit to make the turn more have more, a little bit more fabric. So we're working around, and when we reach the last stitch of each edge, we will work 3 single crochets into that last stitch. Now we can work down the side edge. When working a single crochet border, the rule of thumb is to work 1 single crochet per row of single crochet stitches and 2 single crochets per row of double crochet stitches, since those are taller rows. But since the mini bean stitches are short stitches, we'll treat them like single crochets and work 1 single crochet into the side of each row. We'll insert our hook into the side of the stitch. So I just pick one loop from the front and one from the back that's closest to the end and insert my hook into there, and then work a single crochet right there. Now you'll notice that the next row does not end with the mini bean stitch. It ends with a chain 3 space. And for these rows, we'll just single crochet into the space created by the chain. So the last stitch of each row will alternate between a mini bean stitch or a chain 3 space. And you simply work into the side of the stitch or into the chain 3 space, depending on which row you're at. If you haven't already woven in the loose ends, hold them tight as you reach them and then work over them for a few inches. I'd recommend at least 2 inches over each end to prevent it from coming loose and unraveling your blanket. So grab them as you reach them, hold them tight, and work over them. So you can see how this would get bulky if you've had a lot of color changes at the end of the rows. But it definitely is a more efficient technique than weaving in the ends for every color change. And when you've worked enough stitches that the end feels secure, grab a pair of scissors and snip it off. And I should mention that if I was working on an actual blanket and not a swatch, I probably would have worked a few more stitches before cutting the ends. But this is just a swatch and we're reaching the end of this edge, so I'm cutting them before I typically would. And now that I'm at the last row of this side, I'll work 3 single crochets into the side of the row before turning and working across the bottom edge. And we'll work across the bottom edge single crocheting into each chain stitch from the foundation chain, remembering that when we reach the last chain of the foundation chain, we're going to work 3 stitches into that last stitch before turning and working up the other side. For the final edge, we'll single crochet into the side of each row, just like for the opposite edge, working our way up to the beginning of the round. And then when we reach the last row of this edge, we'll remember that we need to work 3 single crochets again into that spot. Once we've done that, we can join to the first stitch of the round with a slip stitch to complete our first single crochet round for the border. And now chain 1 and single crochet back into that first stitch. And now we're going to work one more round of single crochets to finish off the border. And this round is much easier because we're working into single crochet stitches from the round below, which means that we don't have to worry about where we're going to place the stitches or crocheting over ends. So work your way around, and of course, remember that for each corner stitch, you're going to work 3 single crochets again into those corners because we still need to add fabric on the turns. Once you've worked your way back to the beginning, join to the first stitch of the round with a slip stitch, and then grab your scissors, cut the yarn, and fasten off. You can weave in this end and any other loose ends that you have, and you finished crocheting either your swatch if you're following along with me, or your full-size blanket if you're following the pattern. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Don't forget that you can make the matching bucket hat by visiting Natalie's tutorial on her YouTube channel at natgiso, and I've linked to it in the description below. All of the materials and the free pattern for this blanket are listed there as well. And as always, please like and subscribe to help our fellow crocheters find this video and to be the first to know when I post new content on my channel. Bye for now.